USA, welcome to the Doc and Lefty program here, broadcasting to you from the webcast1live.com studios. And as I said, the lovely, beautiful icebox that is downtown Des Moines.
It's warmer today.
Hey, that's the voice of our world-weary traveler, man about town. If he has a right wing that hasn't been exposed, then I'm Jack Robinson, my good buddy and co-host, Dr. J.
right.
Patrick Petroche. Doc, what's up?
Well, I'm going to expose my right wing today right there. Here's my birthday shirt. It's straight from Kiev. It says it says Ukraine, one land, one people. On the back, it has something like the Winter Warriors, not related to the show, the movie, but that's kind of what they're doing over there.
So what have you been? So tell the people why you were gone last week. What were you doing?
Well, I was going to take a little bit of a vacation, but then there were some problems in a particular orphanage, so I decided to go over there and see what I could do, and that's what I did. Plus, I as you know, I'm getting a little too personal for the show, but I like to write books, so I wrote some chapters in these books, and I think the next chapter is going to star my friend Lefty over here. And
well, it's about time.
Yes, about time.
I can only bring the perspectives you love from the side you hate so often, my friend. Well, I got it.
That's correct.
We generally spend a bunch of time kind of throat clearing, doing a little mental house cleaning before we get into the issues that we're going to talk about. And folks, if you're following along on Facebook, Twitter, social media, the rest of the kind of stuff that we do and tell you about every segment of the show, you will know that we have a guest who is now achieved friend of the show status, my old constitutional law professor from Drake Law School, the James Madison Chair of Con Law there here at Drake here in Des Moines, Professor Mark Kende. Professor, very nice to have you back. Really appreciate it. How was your holiday? How was your Thanksgiving?
Holiday was great. We had both families together, my wife's and mine.
Oh, fantastic.
And everyone got along, so it was awesome.
That's
and
good.
And then people wonder why I leave the country when the holidays show up, because I got along with everybody I was associating with during the holidays.
Fair enough. You got these bitter once divorced guys. I think that my ex-wife's family and I and my family got together twice. Once around the time that we got engaged, and then once for the wedding reception. So you're doing it the right way, and you're doing a good job. So anyway, like I said, if you were following,
so
go
in
ahead.
The studio, what you're saying is the only one here that's emotionally healthy is our guest. That's what you're saying.
Well, no.
Maddie is emotionally healthy. She's got a good relationship, a handsome-looking guy.
Here's the thing, Doc. First of all, that shouldn't be a surprise. We know each other too well for that. And two, when I book guests, my friend, I try and book guests that raise the credibility of this circus by at least 1,000,000%. And I feel like I've achieved that in spades on this show.
And you've been an excellent ringleader. Now, our producer, Maddie, says she's lucky she's got the guy she has, because she is bat crazy. She just said that. She did just now. Now she's denying it. Mark, didn't you see her say that?
I say nothing.
I don't know why we got to keep calling out our producers. That's how we lost the last one.
The last one went, I can't deal with a guy who's that left wing. That's what he did. He had it on out. You get a text. Our Facebook isn't working today. I've been trying to get it up. So the Facebook, and so we can't reach out to our listeners that way. Usually we get a few questions. You get a text over there?
Well, it might be important, but we have more important things to talk about.
We have more important stuff.
So we've got
could be somebody dying.
We got Professor Kende on the show to talk about the recent immigration and executive order kerfuffle that kind of got kicked up after the midterm election, and we're basically what I want to talk about and have an expert on the show to discuss some of the reaction, some of the political reaction, and also give our listeners and our audience a very brief primer on exactly what is an executive order, if there's a difference between what's being called an executive action and executive order, things of that nature, because, and it looks like we got a few more minutes here before our first break, and I'll tell you a quick story about why this is so important. Now, this guy does not listen to the show, so this conversation, Professor, is not going to really help him anyway, but I was talking to a friend of mine over the weekend who called, I think, just to make me mad, and we were talking about he brought up the immigration conversation and made some comment about how it was completely illegal. And I said, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking that no president should be issuing these executive orders? And I said, well, hold on a second. You mean no president ever should issue executive orders? He says, yeah, because that's not the system that we have. And I very calmly, very firmly reminded him that every president since George Washington has issued some kind of executive order. I think FDR issued over 3,000. And he said, well, still, yeah, but they still have to be approved by the Congress. And anyway, we'll get into all of that, but that's the level of discourse that I personally have experienced just very recently, and so I think this conversation couldn't come at a better time. Doc, I know that you've got some other issues that you might want to discuss here while we have...
I have some other issues I'd love to discuss with a constitutional scholar.
Yeah.
But we'll start with the executive order stuff.
Okay.
If you want. I mean, you did a great setup there.
Fair enough. Well, anyway, so...
And you know how much I hate, even complimenting you. And in fact, sometimes it's even difficult to breathe the same air that you've recycled. So,
I feel like you breathing in my recycled air softens you up and makes you a little more rational every single day that we spend together.
I'm soft enough. All you gotta do is look at me. I'm plenty soft.
So anyway, I guess the first question I have for you, Professor Kende, is we've been hearing that there's a distinction between, well, at least the media is treating it as a distinction between an executive action and an executive order. Are those two separate things, or is the media talking about just the same thing?
Well, an executive order is a written document.
Mm-hmm.
Executive action, I mean, I suppose it could be written, but it doesn't have to be written if it involves just activity. An executive order is a written document emanating from the president's office that actually has the force and effect of law, and that's where the controversy lies, because some people are saying that the president shouldn't be able to make law.
Mm-hmm.
And the president's response is, I don't want to make law, but neither the House or the Senate now is likely to act in this area. And historically, as you've already mentioned, there's a long history of presidents going ahead and issuing these orders. They can be overridden by the legislature. But there's a history of this, and that's what the president's done, and he's just done it in a controversial area now.
And so, not to bury the lead here, but we're going to talk a little bit about what area that he's getting into, and so I suppose executive action then must just mean must just be the blanket kind of the umbrella statement. And so when he says I'm taking executive action, is maybe lining up the horses to do a certain thing, or moving the money around, or whatever he needs to do in the particular agencies that he's got authority over. An executive order, obviously, and you can find all this stuff, executive orders, particularly on the Federal Registry. I think it's federalregistry.gov, I think is the website. Every single one from the beginning of time is published in the Federal Registry, and you can look those up by number. You can look them up. I think you can also search them by president and also by year they were issued. So this most recent one we're talking about is the announcement that President Obama made. Gosh, it was before Thanksgiving, but I can't remember the exact date. The Thursday, I think the week before Thanksgiving, so the 20th, November 20th, that he was taking some steps to start addressing the immigration problem we have in this country, particularly that he is going to defer deportation for some eligible undocumented immigrants in this country, that he was going to be allocating more money for Border Patrol folks, or Border Patrol officers, and there were some other steps, and Professor, fill me in on some of the blanks here, because I'm spacing out on some of the other things that he said.
Essentially what he did is he said there's about 5 million illegal immigrants here in the U.S., and these people have been here, are part of our society, and he's going to figure out a way that he can not deport them immediately and figure out a way to give them amnesty. That's essentially what he has said. Now, we've come right up against the break. We want to thank, now, are you a doctor or a professor?
Fine.
Professor Mark Kende. I'm pronouncing that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Great. From Drake University, he is a professor over there in the law school, and I take it in the political science department as well, or just law school?
Right.
So over there at the law school. So we're excited to have him. We're going to be back. We'll be talking more about, basically executive orders, the Obama's plan for amnesty, which includes not working with the Republicans yet again. And on that note, I want to thank all of our sponsors: Bertrosian Associates, Lubinas Law Firm, Halo Capital, Des Moines Anesthesia at 515-574-6442. Please follow us on docandlefty.com. I got Facebook working, so you can join us there. And if you have any questions, you can call in at 855-244-0077. We also want to thank Maddie, our excellent producer. We'll be back right after this break.
Petrosian Associates, how can I help you?
Prof and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Petrosh, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around through the first segment, and we're going to be talking about a lot. This is the Constitutional Law Show, and I can't be more pleased. We have our special guest, friend of the show, Professor Mark Kende. I'm saying that. I'll let him decide whether or not he wants to be tagged with that moniker. But, Professor, so we kind of talked about what the difference is. The media has been throwing around the two different terms. We've distinguished those two different terms. But can you give a little bit of historical context, maybe even some constitutional context and authority for the executive order? Because we've been hearing a lot from the Republicans and a lot from other conservatives that this is just lawlessness. So are executive orders rooted in the Constitution generally?
I think executive orders are kind of a practical development that is constitutional in many cases, although there have been a few that have certainly been declared not to be. But I do want to correct something. This was not an amnesty. This was a deferment that was granted. What happens after the deferment is not decided yet.
Sure.
And the number of people we're talking about has been given at about 5-6 million, which some have estimated to be about half, or at least it's not all of the people who are sort of here illegally. It's a particular group of people who have kids who have either citizenship here or are legal permanent residents, and then their parents are usually the ones who are undocumented. When he made the decision, the president did to issue this order, he actually ruled out a couple million other people on the grounds that he did not have the legal authority to enact an executive order regarding these other folks whose kids were also here illegally. So if you want to talk about lawlessness, this seems sort of the opposite. I mean, he made a distinct legal decision. This is lawful, this is unlawful, and here's what we can do, and I want to keep these families together. I want to use resources and go after people who are much more dangerous than these families, et cetera.
Fair enough. Now, we're certainly going to get into the particulars of it, absolutely. And I guess since you brought that up, I read a report from the New York Times or the Washington Post, one of those two, a couple weeks ago, that George W. Bush was looking at doing a similar type of thing back in 2006, 2007. Had his counsel on the case, and they decide after doing the research that he didn't have the power to do this. So what particularly about the president's decision in your, after, reading what you've read or looking into the particulars of the announcement, would lend you to believe that he's acting within the scope of his executive authority?
Well, congressional immigration laws authorize a great amount of discretion in the executive branch, which implements those laws to make decisions about deportation. George Bush exercised that discretion by not deporting, I think it was some figure of over 1 million people, but maybe that figure is not accurate. I'm always a little skeptical sometimes with regard to spouses that were going to be separated. Other presidents, Ronald Reagan included, used executive orders to make some sort of a decision. So there's actually really an argument that is debatable as to whether this is unilateral president action or, in fact, Congress has given the executive the authority to have discretion. Just like if you think about a prosecutor and they decide, are they going to prosecute for murder? Are they going to prosecute for involuntary manslaughter, or are they not going to prosecute? The problem with the president's order and the difficulty is it's millions of people. And that has people bothered. And that is a serious issue and a serious problem, because in an ideal world, everything would work the way we want it to, which is both houses of Congress would cooperate with the president would cooperate with both houses of Congress, et cetera. But we don't live in that ideal world.
Sure.
No, keep going. You're doing a good job.
You got no response to that?
Well, the truth of the matter is we've already talked about on this show about my personal belief, backed up by some bad experiences here in 2010 and some education, that really the Republicans are the ones that are responsible for this currently in our immigration system. And the truth of the matter is, and this is a point I've made 1,000 times before, you're really going to tear apart these families, send these people back home, send back the main breadwinners, so that these people that weren't on Medicaid and state aid are now on Medicaid and state aid. The bottom line is, this is a Republican concocted mess voted for by Ronald Reagan and Chuck Grassley. And I've said before how much I admire Chuck Grassley, but it was that the bill back in I believe it was 1986,
86,
that allowed for the amnesty. Now, back then, it didn't work out the way the Republicans thought it would work out, but not for the reasons they think. And my issue is, I'm glad somebody's tackling it. The problem that I have, it's the wrong side. I mean, I'm sure the professor will agree with me here. The Republicans have had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to go, hold on, this is their issue. Let's make it ours. Let's come up with something better than what these clowns have come up with, right? Which is simply more amnesty and executive orders. Now, the bottom line is, I agree with both of you guys, because I'm not a lawyer, I'm a doctor. So the bottom line is, the president is allowed to make his executive decisions. He's allowed to issue executive orders. The Congress at that point can make laws, that will say, well, hold on, that executive order isn't legal. That's what our process is supposed to be. Our president's supposed to run the country. The problem is this is a completely cynical move, completely for political reasons, ahead of anything that the Republicans could do, when in fact Boehner could have done something long ago. He could have done this when we first took the majority. He could have said, well, you know what? We have these other issues, but this is an important one coming up. But he didn't. So everything that the professor has said, I may disagree with politically one way or another, but the bottom line is, I agree wholeheartedly with, let's go do something. And I agree it's within the president's power to do this. I think we all agree in here that it was a political cynical move. And the bottom line is at least we're moving somewhere instead of just sitting around going, well, let's build walls. I mean, that's really what got me in trouble in the first place is, I was like, well, hold on. You have everybody saying, I'm going to build a wall over a tunnel system. And part of my statement was the biggest issue that was facing the Hawaiians at the time I had gone out to a conference was illegal immigration. I promise the Mexicans didn't dig any tunnels out to Hawaii, right? And so we have all these nonsensical solutions out there. And, give Barack Obama his due. He's done what he said he's going to do. He's one of the things he said on the original campaign trail in 2007, I'm going to engage Americans. I'm going to make sure that they know that they can be part of the process. And whether you like him or hate him, he has done that. So he's engaged. Well, then now I'm going to have to save the question because I rambled on for a long time without a question. I pontificated. And so I'm going to be back right after the break because my brother Joe just said, listen, ask a question as what the text message here was there. So we're going to be back right after this break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I want to thank our wonderful producer, Maddie G, for DJ Maddie G, for doing this. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank our special guest, Professor Mark Kende. We'll be back right after the break. Lefty has some follow-up questions.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
See them here, see them there. You got bad credit? We don't care.
Visit emetroford.com for your guaranteed credit approval. Good credit, bad credit, no credit. Everybody drives with guaranteed credit approval at emetroford.com. Visit emetroford.com today.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We have my old con law professor, Mark Kende, here in the studio with us today. We're talking about executive orders. We're talking about immigration, and we heard from Doc about sort of his thoughts on the political side of what the president announced back on November 20th. Now, I have heard lots and lots of things. I've heard high praise for what the president has done. I've heard lots of criticism for what the president's done. But one thing that I haven't heard is a fairly decent analysis on just how broad or narrow in scope this order is. And Professor Kende, could you maybe discuss a little bit on this is going to affect 5 million people? Or the estimate, 5 to 6 million people, about 40% of what we think is the number of undocumented workers in the country. And no one really knows what that number is. But is the action that's being proposed in this executive order, is this a fairly broad use of the power, or is it more narrow and more pointed?
I think it's a big deal. I don't think, when you're talking 5 million people, you're talking an executive order with little or no effect. So, and I think that's part of the political controversy, because the issue of illegal immigration is a big deal, and we're talking large numbers. So I think in that sense, it's a big deal. I think in terms of what he's actually doing, surprisingly, there's much more agreement than I actually thought there'd be between conservative and liberal legal scholars on this issue. And I've actually seen a whole bunch of conservative legal scholars who are no fan of President Obama say, yes, he can technically do this, probably. He's probably got authority under the Immigration Act, so it's not even totally unilateral. But they still obviously think it shouldn't work this way politically, and that's where their objection sort of lies.
So I guess we heard, and that's kind of what Doc was suggesting, that this is a cynical move. I mean, one of my favorite parts of doing this show, and you've heard me say this a lot, one of my favorite things to do is to talk about kind of the nitty-gritty of the political decision, kind of the how we grind it out. Now, I know that's not why we had you on today, but can you speak to a little bit of what Doc's concern about the political reality of the decision was?
So the politics is fascinating. So you've got the Senate, which did pass some legislation to much more broadly, support illegal immigrants. The House did not go along when it was Republican-controlled. And, so one question, of course, is what is the approach the House is going to take here? And you've got a whole wide range of people in the House and the Republican side, and you've got some folks on the Democratic side. So you've got that, problem. But the other thing to keep in mind is the word cynical is complicated when you talk about politics, because some might say politics by definition requires a certain level of cynicism. So, I mean, a lot of the discussion about this has been that he made promises to people in the Latino community about what he was going to do, and those promises were not just to get votes, but they were based on his view that it's good public policy to try to give folks a chance to have a status that is not questionable, to keep families together. Now, is that cynicism or is that politics? I think it's probably both.
Well, and from my perspective, I understand, and I'm going to respectfully disagree here. I think that it was just a move to get votes from Latinos. Let's keep in mind the Democrats use their base and take advantage of it. They repeatedly, count on the black vote without actually really doing anything for the black community. I believe it's the same kind of cynicism here. Why not wait? I mean, honestly.
But his timing was backwards then. If he was going to get votes, he should have done it before the midterms.
Absolutely. I agree. But this guy is good at promising. I mean, they're all good at promising. So the bottom line is he could have done something. It wouldn't have gone anywhere because the Republicans on this issue have been obstructionist even within their own party, right? I mean, let's be clear here. And my issue here is you're saying, well, geez, it's not really a cynical move. And you have to have cynicism, and Blake and I agree. Here's what the issue is. Why do it now? Why not do it when the Republicans take the Senate and go, well, all right, give me your immigration reform. Let's do it this way. Give me your immigration reform, and we'll discuss it and talk about it. Just like when you said, well, listen, if you're going to beat Obama, bury him with paperwork.
Right. Well,
this is something that Obama could have said, great, I'm going to wait and see what they got. But what he did instead.
Well, he knows what they have, though.
What?
He knows what they have. They have the bipartisan Senate bill. And I think that if we're going to talk about a cynical move, I think it's less about getting vote gathering, and we can talk about what political party does less for its base than who else. But you don't see a lot of Democrats voting for policies that are directly against their base's interests, like in Kansas or whatever. But anyway, olive branch, buddy boy.
Yes.
But we have a situation where I think if we're going to talk about cynicism, we can talk about him really publicly shaming the Republican Party right after a big victory, and that in and of itself could motivate them into doing something here in the next month. Not likely given the timing, but could motivate them and kind of cut that momentum
But now I think Professor Kende is going to agree with me here. Boehner got up there and said, we're going to tackle immigration reform. Mitch McConnell said, geez, we're going to tackle immigration reform. That's one of the things that they really had to soften their stances on, I believe, in order to get elected, even though Mitch McConnell really went ahead and waffle stomped his opponent, turns out, at the end. But they did. They moderated their stance quite a bit about this. So my thinking is, why do it now? Why? There's no reason to do it now, except, just like you said, finger in the eye of the Republican Party. And that just bodes ill for any kind of, we talked a couple of weeks ago, you have to look at, are they going to be talking about, trying to work things out, or are they going to be poking each other's eye the entire time? Well, that's what it seems to be going. So I think we're going to have another session, another Congress where nothing's going to get done.
The one thing I'd say, though, is that Congress still can do something, and that's the one thing about an executive order is, you have a Republican-controlled Congress, by all means, go to it. Go to it. Come back in January with your Republican-controlled Congress. Come up with a proposal. I'm not a fan of executive orders over the normal legislative process. I am no fan of that.
And that's something we agree on.
And I think 6 years into an Obama administration, I think it's fair to say he's demonstrated some patience in terms of dealing with this issue in a way that is perceived as somewhat dictatorial by some people. So bottom line is, I do agree with you on the idea that if the Republicans come up with proposals and they can unite as a party, because there is some division there, and talk to the president. I don't think the president has said, I won't talk to the Republican Party. I don't think he said that at all.
Well, and we're about to go to a break, but I want to pose this to both of you guys because I think that there might be a potential weakness if there is a strategy, and we know there's a strategy, but we aren't clear as to what it is. There's a weakness in what the president did, because what happens if the Republicans come back in January and they present a bill loaded down with border security and all of the Republican goodies that he will absolutely veto, and then they turn around to the public and say, but President Obama, what happened? What happened? We're going to go to a break, but Doc, take us out.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I want to thank Professor Mark Kende for joining us today. He's a professor at Drake University Law School. So we're very honored to have him on here. We like getting smart guys on here. I'll tell you that. I want to thank DJ Matty G for running the show. We're going to be back right after this break. Please stay tuned. We want to thank all of our sponsors.
Prof and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. We are proud to work with military personnel and their families. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertroche, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere. Our licensed mental health therapists provide individual counseling to children, adolescents, and adults, including couples and marital counseling. Visit our website at bertrocheandassociates.com for more information or call 515-334-9484. Our offices are located at 5525 Meredith Drive in Des Moines, just east of Skate North off Merle Hay Road. Isn't it time to talk to someone? Take care of yourself and your family. Contact Bertroche and Associates.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. And I hope that you guys are enjoying the conversation that we're having with Professor Mark Kende as much as I am. I know the doc is been giddy with giddiness since he got back to know that not only do
I've been giddy with giddy upness.
I'm
ready.
Fair enough. That we actually have a guest that
we actually have a guest. I'm glad you're going to finish that.
Guest. Yeah,
yes,
I actually have a guest that we're so happy to have. Anyway, no, right before the break, I identified in what, in my opinion, is a pretty serious flaw to what the president did here with his immigration proposal. I just want to get your guys' thoughts about it. Professor, I'll start with you. He's going to get a bill, I think, that is a red meat gift to the Republican base here in January. What do you think about that?
Well, I would assume the Republicans are going to certainly come up with something that is going to be suitable for their base. There's no question about that. Whether he made a strategic error or not, that's complicated. I mean, the president's argument is that for years he has tried to make deals and arrangements and work with the Republicans, and his argument, right or wrong, is that he has not gotten received well, and the Republicans have basically said the reverse, you know? Mm-hmm. So is it a mistake at that point to sort of throw down your cards and say, all right, I'm showing you my deck, and forcing the other side to act after 6 years of essentially non-action? I'm not sure that's a mistake. Now, is that going to win him a diplomacy award? Probably not.
No, he's already got a Nobel Peace Prize, so
yes,
he
does.
One.
You know that he, quite frankly, even he said, "I don't quite deserve this."
No,
yet.
what do you think about that, Doc?
Well, I think I go back to he's trying to garner Latino votes, but not for himself, but for the Democratic Party. He's trying to set it up so that there's some kind of a broader base support for him and his party when 2016 rolls around. I also think he's trying to rehab his image a little bit, in my opinion, because we've talked about this. You've been disappointed in him. A lot of liberals have been disappointed in him. Moderates have been disappointed, and of course, the Republicans have never been happy with him overall. So I think it's a three-pronged strategy for him. One, it's a stick in the eye to the Republicans. Two, it's going to motivate his base and go, oh, hey, look at this. Because one of the things that we found out from analyzing the vote, there's a lot of minority voters stayed home this last time around. Mm-hmm. And then three, he's got to motivate that. And the third thing is, he's got to secure his legacy. So far, and don't get me wrong, I mean, Obamacare is a big piece of legislation, but it has not been a very popular piece of legislation, not as popular as he wanted it to be. So now he has a shot at getting his legacy more secure than what it was.
And so maybe the mistake then was, like you had said earlier, was not doing it before the midterm to give some of the Democratic base more of a reason to be excited about. I mean,
to go out and vote.
Right. And that certainly was a problem. And you know that my position on the midterm, regardless of what your brother may say, was a turnout problem.
Well, actually, it was one of the highest turnouts we'd had in a long time. That's the 36.4% of the people that were eligible showed up, and apparently that's a high number. That's an article I read out of the Wall Street Journal yesterday.
That's the lowest number since World War II. Anyway, I guess we could call it two different things and mean two different things. Anyway, no. So one of the other concerns that I have about this, and this is more of a broad-minded concern about what he's done. And I think that his number of executive orders is in the 190s or 180s. It's not. I think that he would have to issue 50 orders a year for the next 2 years to catch George W. Bush. I think I looked that up over the weekend. I think that's around the number. what I haven't personally researched. I don't know if you've personally researched, Professor, about how expansive his executive orders have been, but I certainly am concerned with something like this. We're talking about 5 million people. The general seeming expansion of executive power. Every president, in my opinion, every president except for Jimmy Carter, to a certain degree, has attempted successfully to expand executive power in this country, whether it be greater control over the military, less oversight from Congress, or being able to deploy forces without congressional oversight in general, or making policy changes like this. And do you see this as an example of another, I don't want to say overreach, but more executive power being, or more power in general being consolidated in the office of the president?
Yeah, I think this is problematic in the broader sense, that not so much focusing on this particular executive order, but post-Watergate, there were some folks who thought the presidency was diminished, and some folks, mainly, candidly, in the Republican Party, who wanted to restore presidential power. But what seems to have happened is it's become something that has been supported by more than just Republicans. And, there are some Democrats who, frustrated with the lack of cooperation from Republicans, and President Obama, on occasion, certainly has indicated that he's willing to go it alone. Now, if you look at the statistics, he's not up there in terms of executive orders with President Bush. He's not up there in the area of signing statements. So I guess you could say comparatively, he hasn't done as much in that regard. But then you also have 9/11.
Yep.
You got to throw that in there. 9/11, I don't think you have, whether Republican or Democratic president, you're going to have a president who's going to use executive power in a vigorous way.
Yeah.
So you got to throw 9/11 in there. I think that complicates things. But the bottom line is, we have a fairly dysfunctional democracy right now. It's hard to get big things done. And President Obama still has some ambition. And Doc said this, I think, really well. I think there's a legacy issue here. And the question, though, is this the right way to achieve the legacy or not? And it's not ideal, but I think that's part of the issue.
Well, I'm going to address the legacy issue now. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves with an executive order, and then later on, I believe the Congress went and solidified that executive order. I mean, you guys would know more than me, right?
Right.
Nobody cares that he did it through an executive order. Right. Nobody remembers, geez.
The Emancipation
Lincoln.
Proclamation.
Yeah,
right.
But most people today have no idea that it's an executive order.
It'd be curious to know, hey, guy on the street, freeing the slaves, the executive order, was that the right way to go? No, it was a dictatorial move. Emancipation Proclamation.
Well, but the bottom line is nobody remembers that the controversy. Nobody's going to remember the executive order controversy here. Nobody's going to remember. All they're going to remember is amnesty. All the people remember about 1986 amnesty was Reagan got stabbed, if you're on my side, or Reagan did the right thing, and why you guys, angry about it. Mm-hmm. Nobody remembers the deals that were made, the headlines that were made, the name calling on either side. Nobody's going to remember that. So I think executive action or the executive order is not going to be remembered. One of the things that I think Obama has effectively done has single-handedly outmaneuvered the leadership of the Republican Party at every step of the game, starting with the caucuses in Iowa in 2008. He embraced the Republicans coming in and defeating Hillary. I mean, honest to goodness, that's what he did. I think, because how many times did he say, I think the process should be open and fair? How many times did he say this? And so I think that, a lot of people might not like this, but I think he's just successfuled outmaneuvered John Boehner yet again. That's another take.
Well, the thing is,
the problem is we've run up against a thing, our break.
Oh, okay.
So save that question. Yep. But I think next time we're talking about expansion of executive power. For the next segment, I would like to talk a little bit about Ferguson and an issue that's going around on the right-hand side that Eric Holder is talking about. Some steps that could potentially lead to the nationalization of the police force. At least that's what the right is fearful of. So we're here with our special guest, Professor Mark Kende. We're going to be back right after this break. We're going to talk to him about expansion of executive power and potential of nationalizing the police force. Thanks, DJ Matty G, for tuning in. We want to thank our sponsors, Petrosian Associates, Halo Capital, Lubinas Law Firm, Des Moines Anesthesia at 515-574-6442. Follow us at Facebook and Twitter, and also at docandlefty.com. We'll be back right after the words from these sponsors.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We are rapidly running out of time, as we do every single week, especially when we have a guest with us. And we love all of our guests. We love having people on. I'm particularly pleased to have my old professor, Mark Kende, on the show. I'm talking a little bit about the expansion of executive power, and I want to just put a period on the comment that we had. I think that we have seen especially over the last 14 years, this not just expansion of executive power, kind of being aggressively expanded by the executive branch, but this abdication of authority by both the judicial branch and the that never happens to me. Good grief.
Yeah,
I apologize for that.
If that's my wife, I'm not here.
But this abdication of the judicial branch and the legislative, where we have seen the Congress just seemingly paralyzed and unwilling to do anything in response to a presidential edict or an executive order, the way we have here with immigration. Now, Doc brought something up over the break that he wanted to talk about, because I guess if we're talking about expansion of executive authority, that dovetails nicely into the ongoing conflict in Ferguson, Missouri, and some of the steps that outgoing Attorney General Eric Holder wants to take to address some of the violence that's been perpetuated by the citizenry, but also by the police around the country. And I guess your friends on the right have a new conspiracy theory that you gleefully want to try out here.
No. Well, here's what the issue is. Eric Holder is going around saying, well, listen, we need to change some of these procedures that are obviously causing some difficulties in our cities, right? Mm-hmm. They had that poor 12-year-old kid get shot with a toy gun. Now, it doesn't matter that the gun looked real. You can't tell. Nobody's showing a picture of this kid. He might have been a big kid. I've known 12-year-old that were 6 feet tall. My son's one of them. He looked man-like when he was 12. So here's this kid with the mentality of a child, looking like a man, waving a gun around. Well, the cop says, well, really, I didn't have an option. I really didn't have a choice. Well, that's because of the procedures they put in place. Down in Ferguson, it's the same thing. They have procedures put in place. And so Eric Holder is talking about, we're going to start establishing national standards. I mean, essentially, that's what he's saying. Establishing national standards, the next step is establishing a national police force. I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I think that's something that can happen, especially with the way, you weaken the power of the physician in the 1990s with the Clintons. Then you get this framework for universal health care in Obamacare. The next step is going to be universal health care. It's not that far-fetched. So what do you think? Do you think that there's going to be a risk, any kind of risk, and what do you think the percentage would be if Eric Holder starts introducing national standards and national procedures for police, what if that's going to eventually lead to a nationalized police force?
Yeah, I mean, I'd start off by saying I'm not a big thinker in terms of the idea. I don't think a national police force is a risk. I think standards are a serious issue. I used to be a practicing lawyer. I had a case where a gentleman had a very bad night and was probably somewhat mentally troubled and had a bat and started banging the windows out of some cars, and 3 police arrived, and all he had was a bat, and they shot him 16 times. We brought in a training expert from the Chicago Police Department. It's not easy to get a police training expert to testify against a police officer. He testified that the police officer who shot him was not well trained. So I'm no fan of national standards, and I am a big fan of the police. But I do think there is a huge training problem that exists in certain parts of this country, because what our training expert said was, the guy only had a bat, so if they just waited him out, just waited. Now, your example, 12-year-old with a gun, different story. So,
the bottom line is these are tragedies. Let's keep in mind that these are tragedies.
Mm-hmm.
You have
thank you very much for saying that.
Children that are getting killed, and I understand Michael Brown down in St. Louis. He might have been a bad guy. He might have been a criminal and the rest of it. And the grand jury didn't find anything there to indict. But this little boy, out in a park, just pretending or whatever he was doing is making other people scared. Don't you think, Professor, that there is a problem with perception of what the police do and how difficult their job is?
I think there's a difficult job, or I think it's harder to think of a more difficult job than being a police officer in a place that has racial problems that are occurring. And that's what you've got in Ferguson. And there's a gap and a misunderstanding between racial groups. You have a few amazing people who are able to cross sides and try to bring about reconciliation. I think Eric Holder, as Attorney General, is trying to come up with some way to minimize the likelihood of these things happening. I think that's a good goal. As to the specifics of any sort of national standards, I'm probably with you on this. I'm not necessarily a big fan of national standards on something like this. But the idea that there should be more training probably for some police forces, if that's what's involved, then I think that's probably a good thing.
All right. I have a question, and this is strictly an opinion question. My opinion is that President Obama and Eric Holder have not done as much as they could, and in fact, in some cases have made the racial tensions down there even worse. Lefty and I have talked about race baiters down there right and left, and neither one of us agree that these people that are just trying to stir up trouble and fame for themselves should be down there. But I believe the automatic assumption that the white cop had to be guilty, and Obama has a kind of a history of this, kind of jumping in on, blaming the white person, because remember the guy with the beer, he wanted to have a beer with this guy he accused and all this. Remember that whole thing?
Skip Gates, the Harvard
yes.
professor.
So the bottom line is, do you think, in your opinion, that President Obama and Eric Holder, through their actions, have made things better, worse, or didn't really impact one way or another down there?
There's no doubt that when a president and an attorney general say something about a local development, they have some impact. My sense is that, though, and here's where we may disagree, I think President Obama has gone out of his way to not hammer the grand jury process, to not say the grand jury process was a failure. I think what he's done is the natural thing, which is to sympathize with the death of the family. And, the reality is Mr. Wilson's still alive and this family lost someone. And so I don't think it's a matter of him preferring blacks over whites. I just think it's kind of a natural reaction to the tragic part. And the tragic part is there was the death, and the person who died happened to be black, happened to be killed by a white person. I think, could he say other things that might even be better and more constructive? I'm sure any president could, but I don't see him as hammering the grand jury process. And
he hasn't even gone to Ferguson.
We're right up against it. There's something I just want to say here, because what I see a lot on Facebook is every time there's a tragedy like this, because look at it, nobody wins. Police doesn't win. This poor guy, the cop's life's ruined. Obviously, Michael Brown's family is ruined. Here's what I see all the time. like this guy from Waterloo that got killed down in Ferguson. A group of non-whites obviously attack this white person, and yet there's no hate crime. Where's the injustice? I mean, that's what you see on Facebook. Here's the difference, right? If you look at Trayvon Martin, it looked like the cops didn't do anything. And if you look at this situation in Ferguson, there is a lot of room to go, well, hold on. Here, this guy's unarmed. I don't care if he is kicking the hell out of you, right?
Right. And
you have this, what it is a perceived lack of pursuing something that would be justice, right? If they would have said, hold on, we know this has happened. We're trying to put everything together. And I'm just going to tell my conservative friends, that's what the difference is the perception of, because these people, 3 of the 4 people that beat this guy from Waterloo have been captured, and they're looking for the fourth one. Here you have a person that shot Trayvon Martin and is free for six weeks, and it takes a wave to get any kind of process going. I think that's the thing. We're going to be back right after this break. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Professor Mark Kende for joining us tonight, because it's tough to listen to both Lefty and I. And want to thank DJ Matty G, who has not yet fallen asleep back there at the wheel. We'll be back right after this break. Please stay tuned and help us keep the lights on here by listening to our sponsors.
Prof and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. We are proud to work with military personnel and their families. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Prof, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere. Our licensed mental health therapists provide individual counseling to children, adolescents, and adults, including couples and marital counseling. Visit our website at bertroshandassociates.com for more information, or call 515-334-9484. Our offices are located at 5525 Meredith Drive in Des Moines, just east of Skate North off Merle Hay Road. Isn't it time to talk to someone? Take care of yourself and your family. Contact Bertrosh and Associates.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We got this last few minutes here before we get out, and I just want to kind of put another period or exclamation point on what Doc said, because I agree with a lot of what you said. I really do. And the anger that occurred after Trayvon Martin, the anger that occurred after Michael Brown, was directed, in my opinion, from my view of things, at this perceived. And saying the word perceived kind of suggests that it's not exactly 100% true, but at least you had this demonstration of Black lives don't matter is kind of the overarching point that you sort of made, and it looked that way. Whether or not that's what anybody thought at the time is irrelevant, because it looked that way, and that in and of itself is something that needs to be addressed. And this is where I'm going to push back on some of the race baiting comment that you made today and that you've made in the past about guys like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, whatever, is that I think there's a different thing to say your concern is not legitimate than there is to say the way that you bring about your concern is not legitimate. Because when I hear you talk about guys like Al Sharpton critically, what I hear a lot from conservatives in general is, hey, we don't like Al Sharpton, so everything coming out of his mouth is BS. We don't have to worry about it. When he's actually expressing something, even if it's inartful, is a real concern. But I know we don't want to get too deep into
let's not waste the professor's time with
right. So, but I know you want to talk some more about him, about some other stuff that you had in mind here in the last 10 minutes.
I have a couple of questions for you. Now, I know there's another part of Obamacare that's coming up here in are they scheduled to hear it in February?
Well, they are. Yeah, they're going to have a Supreme Court argument on another part of Obamacare.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's coming up here early next year.
Right.
Do you think, from what you know, that Justice Roberts, since he took so much flack for his last decision, is going to vote more with the conservatives this time along essentially party lines, or do you think he's going to step out and join the other side?
You know, if I had the answer, I would enter the lottery. But I'm going to just elaborate and say, I don't think that will affect his decision, and maybe that's a naive viewpoint. This is a statutory case. It's not a constitutional case, and it's really about how well a statute was written or how poorly it was written. And so in that sense, there's a little less at stake in the context of the court making a massive constitutional ruling.
Okay.
So maybe that gives him a little more leeway to feel like if he leans conservative, which obviously he does, he can in this area lean conservative more comfortably. Having said that, on the other hand, it would be a very unique situation to have a program that's now been around for a while, that's been once approved, tossed out at this late stage, and that cautiousness which he seems to bring to his conservatism. Because, you know, you have conservatives who are less cautious than him. Let's put it that way. Some might even say he betrayed the conservative cause on that one.
And see, and that's the point I was kind of getting to is the conservatives are talking about, will he redeem himself?
Yeah.
Does he need to redeem himself on this decision? Do you think that's something that would ever weigh on his mind? Because obviously public opinion did weigh on his mind during his last decision. Do you think it will be that the same way this time, trying to secure his legacy? Because everybody in government's concerned with legacy. So what do you think?
I don't think he'll be thinking a lot about whether he has to redeem himself or not. But I do think he will be thinking about what is the significance of my potentially being the key vote that strikes down what a particular president thinks is the signature legislation of that president's 8-year term. I think that will weigh on him. But I hope he doesn't decide it's based on redeeming or not. I hope, as a good lawyer does, he makes what he thinks is the best legal decision. And maybe I'm naive in hoping for that, but that's what I'm hoping for.
What, that lawyers are going to do the right thing?
Well,
I think you're naive in thinking that.
Well, no, he's also remember he came to the law school and gave a talk right after he got appointed, and talked about being the balls and strikes justice. And I would argue that in some cases he's done that very well. In other cases he hasn't done it so well. But he sort of did that with the first Obamacare ruling, finding a way to call the legislation constitutional the way that a lot of Supreme Court justices have done in the past, where they've said, hey, we're going to give great deference to the Congress here, and we're going to go out of our way to make sure this thing stands up. So it's
all right. So I just have one final question. Now, you were Lefty's professor. What kind of student was he? I just want to know.
The bottom line is if all of our students had the level of strong opinions and thinking about these issues the way Lefty does, then we'd be in a good place. And I mean that in the sense of whether you're on the left or the right. I really love the students who have strong opinions and who voice those opinions and who discuss those opinions.
Well, that doesn't tell me how he was as a student.
Oh, he was a fine student. Absolutely fine.
On a scale from 1 to 10, one being absolutely terrible and on the left, and 10 being a metaphysical conservative.
He was a very good student, but I do not have his grade or his transcript in front of me, so I can't tell you that.
It's a good thing that nobody does.
Hey, listen, I'm willing to buy it because I got to have something.
Well, no one. I'm not running for office, so those transcripts. And actually, what would protect him is if I decided to run for office, because then nobody would ever get him. But what he's just said was it was tough for him to get me to shut up and let other people talk, I think is the shorthand. Well,
that's not what I tried to say, but it was a real pleasure having you in class.
Well, I would tell you, it's difficult to get him to pipe down over there.
It's true. But speaking of pipe, what the best way to get me to pipe down though is to run up to the end of the hour. So Doc, we got to bring this home.
Oh yeah, you bet. We want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I was a little bit behind the 8 ball. I didn't realize we had a guest till I showed up in the office or in the studio, and I'm like, what? Where's Ed? Is what I asked. So anyway, I thought you were a guest host. So I'm glad that Professor Mark Kende showed up today.
Yep.
We really appreciate having you on. I would like to invite you on again any other time we have anything to discuss constitutionally. I want to thank my partner in crime, Lefty, over here, because this show, doing it on your own, it takes a lot out of you. And if you have a partner that's really good at what he does, it makes it a lot easier. I want to thank DJ Matty G, who's sitting back here giving me the fisheye like, I got kids at home I want to see. And I want to thank all of our sponsors, Halo Capital, Petrosian Associates, Lubinas Law Firm, Des Moines Anesthesia. Follow us on Doc and Lefty, Facebook, Twitter. We'll see everybody here next week. Thanks again, Professor, for showing up.
Good night, everybody.
Hi, I'm Representative Tom Shaw, and I love these guys. Both of them.
Love these guys. Get over here. Get over here. Love both of them.